So we're gonna start with Bruce again, key person in the Visa Green Consortium. He's a lawyer and people that knows about money. This is something engineers, we have no clue, and we get into trouble because we have no clue. So we need help from policymakers and economists, people that know about the color of money. So Bruce, thank you for being here, and it's a pleasure to introduce you to talk. Thank you.
Ramiro, thanks for your leadership on all of these topics and for getting us together. I'm going to go and pick up where Nancy forecasted. So Nancy, thank you for the mention and the shout out. We will talk later about that. You've heard about me being a different kind of person. I do come from multiple backgrounds, finance, law, emergency response, etc. I also have a neuromuscular condition called dystonia. It'll make my head shake. But as a lawyer in California, New York, and Pennsylvania, although not here, you'll know when I disagree with you. Be prepared. So I thought I would share that the impetus for me to get involved in a topic like peace engineering was the work that I did after 9/11 at the command center in New York City, and asking what would be needed for Homeland Security in New York City of my young family. And I decided that we needed to have Homeland Security everywhere. And in order to do that, because of the frequent targeting of Wall Street by terrorists and others, including cyber, we needed to fix finance. So that was a key inspiration for the work that you're seeing. Financing peace does require new tools, as Joe talked about, new data-driven tools, so quantifiably auditable tools. And as Nancy said at SMD and other labs, quantifying vulnerabilities and resiliencies before they matter is as important as the post-event retrospectives. So imagine does everyone know what a Bloomberg terminal looks like that traders use? So I've given you a small shot of it on the top of the slide. So it's what Wall Street and investment banker and hedge fund managers use to price different commodities, different equities, stocks, bonds, sovereign debt, everything. So imagine on that screen, which everybody who uses this is the tool they use to flow money, flow capital around the world. Imagine we added a new screen today, and it would have a return on peace, an ROP, not just a return on investment, ROI. We would use a periodic table of quality of life scorecard, and I'll show you much more about that, to show regional vulnerabilities based on the highly granular data that governments collect as part of the natural budgeting and appropriation processes. Some weighted risks so that you could compare apples to apples. You could have a small city compared to a like small city. You could have a large city compared to a like large city. And then you'd have a range of financially engineered investments, and I'll get into that in a second. But the variance in the type of investment appeals to different investor horizons. So the state pension fund would have a very long-term horizon. Hedge fund folks might have a daily or hourly horizon. So give me a second. There. Sadly, this is a news flash from Wall Street. Wall Street will not build the tools I just described on their own. They just won't. We need peace engineers, as Joe was saying, to understand finance, just like he was saying, understand medicine and Ramiro was saying, by putting yourself in a hospital operating room, you need to understand finance to know the tools that would matter to people who flow money. The superpower for peace engineers would be leveraging this new convergence of peace engineering finance. And you can move those three words in any order and get to a different role that you might play. I don't know if you know Fearless Girl, but she's badass, if I can say that without violating the diplomacy here. She should be celebrated. She represents someone who stands up to authority. You know, some of you work in positions of authority, but you can be badass in those roles. You're fearless. You have a new generation that is fearless, that's wanting to make room for peace engineered finance. Right? And I think it's going to come in all different flavors of person and nationalities and gender and everything, diversity. Oh my gosh, look who I have in the room today. Holy mackerel. I got a lot of fearless peace engineers here, right? Thank God. And thanks for coming. So we could use some Latinos in finance for leadership in understanding the impacts of money. We talk a lot about Latin America as debtor in conversations. It's the wrong way to think about this, okay? So today, you're going to hear from me on a couple of topics, and then there'll be a pause and we'll go to some of the other topics tomorrow. As Joe said, we are navigating complex resiliencies for global finance locally. You saw when a relatively small bank, Silicon Valley Bank, hiccuped, was at risk of failure. All kinds of ripples of risks emerged that people really didn't understand. I do a lot with space finance. Space companies started, young companies started to wonder what's going on. But finance is pretty simple. And who here has had finance courses as part of your education? Great. You're going to consider this review. So finance is not that complicated at its core. This is a map of the financial system from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York in 2010, 2012, after they were diagnosing what happened with the global financial crisis. How did we miss this in such a large capacity? And what they realized was that top row, that top layer of the graphic is what they regulated. They regulate institutions that hold deposits for people who don't need that money today and move it through loans and other mechanisms to institutions that can use the money and repay it in the future. The whole rest of that slide, who here is like an electrical engineer? Anybody? I knew I'd have one. So it should look a little like a circuit board to you. The rest of the slide are the different forms of financial institutions that take from the regulated part of the system risk. And all this system is doing, the entirety of financial markets is doing is four things: transforming risk, return, asset type, and maturity. How long does the capital stay in that form? How long does it stay as a loan before it's repaid and it's turned into a limited partnership investment in a venture capital fund, for example? So the money is constantly, and risks are moving in and out of these circuits all the time. And what you're hearing from me is saying we need peace engineers to quantify how to move those risks that can better stabilize not only local governments, but global peace. So it is like moving atoms, except it's moving money. So here's my clinical view of finance, and we have some problems in all of our countries with why do we trust people who manage money? You may have wondered, are bankers inherently evil, as in most movies? There are some good banker movies like It's a Wonderful Life and American Madness, but it's very rare. And in fact, okay, this is a factoid you came to Albuquerque to hear. I was wanting to find comic books that featured bankers going back to 1950s. I found no good banker in any comic book. They were always bad bankers. Tells you something. So this slide comes from 3.5 hours with the head of Stanford's Aero Astro department. So he's someone who has put robots on the moon. And he's from Hungary. And he says to me, Bruce, we're friends. He says, Bruce, I don't understand my investment report that my investment manager was giving. I said, George, you're an Aero Astro professor at Stanford. You don't understand your financial report. He says, I want to understand it. But you get one slide to explain the whole thing. So after 3.5 hours, this is the slide. People put money as investors into different vehicles. Those, whether it's a pension fund or an investment fund or a bank, those flow into different flavors of investments. So fixed return would be a bond, variable would be a stock, let's say. Interbank loans, so banks lend to each other all the time. The way that those investments are repaid is through real assets. So people who go and have a job, or businesses that sell goods, or a city that gets taxes. And then to the extent that we need liquidity or the ability to render cash in a moment when someone wants to resume, God bless, we have uninvested reserves. All of that whole layer cake of activities ride on a layer of impacts. The impacts are coming from those real assets, people, businesses, cities, governments. And so when you look at it from a banker or an investment manager point of view, we live on spread, the difference between what we earn on investments and what we have to pay to the people who are the source of the capital. Then if we understood what the people, businesses, cities are doing as the real assets, we might lose less money when we have to take over a failed investment. And then the impacts would tell us the value of the assets that produce those impacts, right? You don't need solar roofs on everybody's homes when there's crime in the streets and the solar is going to be ripped off to be sold for drugs or whatever. Okay. So this is a layered approach that would raise trust in the financial system and thereby have people use their money with intention differently, right? Better. It would also make sure using data such as Joe had off with, would make sure that we actually don't under and over invest in the things that matter. Pollution mitigation being one, climate change be another. So you would see through this mechanism a sanity of money, different than what the Bloomberg terminal would without the return on fees and the other activities show you. So how should we invest? How do we measure an investment's value in this system? And I came to the notion that governments and who works in a government or is part of a government entity today. Yes, most of you are. So when a government appropriates money, it goes to its Congress, it goes to its parliament. It goes with lots of reports, and nice PowerPoints, and arguments, and it comes with statistics, and the statistics say, if you don't give me the money that we're asking for, people are going to have a shorter lifespan. The neighborhoods are going to have more crime, on and on and on. We call these KPIs, key performance indicators. And I thought, well, what if we use those? And the reason I came to that, for those of you who know about the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, this may turn your head a little crazy, but you'll be okay, as I've done. So when you go back and look at the original periodic tables, there's something really fascinating about this to me. First, the scientists of the day were saying, I know how to measure and what I know to measure as carbon. And here's the weight. And here's how it clusters and relates to other elements that I know to measure. But then you see at the bottom of the chart, some blank spaces, unnumbered, unknown elements, which is a great sign of humility and collegiality. Something sometimes in engineering schools we could use more of, okay? And so over time, our ways of measuring have gotten much more precise. Some of the atomic weights have been changed. And we've added lots of different elements that we didn't know had to have existed, but we had made room for them, or scientists had made room for them in the original chart. So, as Nancy has forecasted with my slide, let's build a periodic table of quality of life today. And we might start with health. Health matters, right? And we could decide that health is the only thing that matters when we're having a conversation about government finance, how the government should budget. And very quickly, we'd see that the urban systems, the quality of the water and the air, and the grit that's stirred up by the streets, that per 100,000 people makes us sicker than not. And then we can say, well, what's the form of energy? Are we using clean or dirty energy? And how is that playing a role? And then we could say, does that have is that factoring into climate change? And what I just wanted to show you is a couple terms for navigating this periodic table. One are the adjacencies, the intersectionalities across the table, things that you didn't care about, say energy systems. When you're talking to people who are in the healthcare, they should care. Second is the term VAR, value at risk. Okay, my finance people in the room. Value at risk is a method that we use in balancing portfolios to say, do I add an Apple stock or sell an Apple stock? If I'm managing a pension fund, I'm not really loyal or not to a particular stock. I'm trying to look at the yield to the portfolio and how does the portfolio perform in periods of economic expansion and, let's say, recession. So as an economy naturally goes through those cycles, have I built a portfolio that resists the downturns and takes advantages of the upturns? And that's, so the value at risk is what's an individual stock's impact on that total return. The F in front of it is me saying, what's the functional value of risk, the F, VAR, of adding, let's say, some more education so that people wash their hands, therefore they don't get as sick, or they wear masks, therefore they're not as contagious during periods of COVID. And then finally, sustainable resiliency is my trademark term for a regional credit score. So imagine that per 100,000 people who live in Buenos Aires, like my cousin Carlos, who hopefully is on the web here, that per 100,000 people over the last 10 years, these KPIs had a certain set of gaps. Over the next 10 years, what is the likelihood that all the gaps will close by at least 10%? That probability is the credit score. That becomes a way to reward governments who construct budgets and programs that are spending the money in those budgets more efficiently to assure the bondholders who buy the government bonds that in 2033, Buenos Aires will be cheaper for 100,000 people to budget for than it is today, because the KPIs will have improved by the management of that, which allows for the tools that Joe was saying, for engineers to say, I have a new way to close the KPI gap in health, or a new way to close the gap in pollution. When we look at it from a financial point of view, camels, other than the animal, who knows the acronym CAMELS? Probably not many. So CAMELS is an acronym from the Basel Bank, the BIS, the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, so that banks can trade in each other's risks. And CAMELS is the risk-weighted score given to bank portfolios. And by reverse engineering the failure of US banks, I've divined this weighting that is secret. So bank regulators will not tell you this weighting. And so CAMELS is an acronym. It stands for capital adequacy, asset quality, management, earnings, liquidity, and systemic risk. And as you see from the red pie slice, 55% of the score relates to NPLs, non-performing loans. So when a bank isn't being repaid on its loans, it has to reserve from its capital to cover those losses and sell those bad loans. So the twist on this, from the slide I told you that I constructed of my clinical view, is if I knew I was making loans as a banker that have real impacts in the city of Buenos Aires, those loans will always be repaid, because the services that are performed by the assets the loans have established will be key to driving the sustainable resiliency performance of the city of Buenos Aires, right? So I will reduce the number or the magnitude of bad loans by making the loans that I extend relate to real economy impacts, right? This is good news for financial engineers of peace. This is just a screenshot of one of the banks for whom I have estimated. As you see, my bank, California Bank Commissioner friends tell me I have to have the disclaimer, this is not the official CAMELS rating for Bank of America. This is my reverse engineered version of the secret rating. As you can see, it's like a golf score. It's supposed to be 0 to 2 is a healthy bank. 2 to 3 is the bank's getting a call from the regulators. What's going on with your bank? Above 3.0, regulators live in your bank. Above 4, they close your bank. So during the crisis years, you're seeing that B of A, by my estimation, was for years and years above 3.0 and was a troubling bank. Here's another one. Go forward. Got it. All right. So let's go deeper into how you build a periodic table, because you all are in your ministries or in your government roles. Assume that you're in one of these 4. I could ask you for the education department of Argentina tell me over the last 10 years, what's been the measure of illiteracy, of college graduation rates, of student loan defaults, etc. I could ask you, tell me for the next 10 years, what do you think it's going to be? I could also ask, how much money did you spend over the last 10 years to generate whatever progress was made or not? And over the next 10 years, how much money do you expect to use? This is to an engineer's mind, a production function for education. The more money I spend with the technologies available for using that money has the impact of these KPIs. I can do the same for energy and the KPIs that energy tracks. Environment, same. Health, same. Public safety or crime, same. And so what the periodic table that I've designed creates is a interdisciplinary form of communication where the details of what you didn't know matter to you can quantitatively be shown to matter to the QoL, the quality of life element that you care about. And we can go through the entirety of a government budget and analyze the budget into a periodic table semblance of we all need to go on to get on. I don't know, the numbers of examples where this would matter are infinite. I like to imagine, I've spent a fair amount of time in Washington, D.C. at the Capitol, where Congress has one room and they're debating the healthcare bill, and next room is debating energy. And each room is saying that they have impacts in the other rooms, but nobody holds that whole line of argument for the budgets accountable. This would grow citizen trust in the budgets and how they are spent, and the traceability of how that money actually created better quality of life. I just threw this slide in because Internet of Things isn't really yet in finance. Bankers don't know how to use the data. Yes, we know how to use in insurance, we can track cargo shipments, and we have imagery from space that can tell us how many cars are in the parking lot at Macy's. But we have much to do as engineers to use IoT. And finance, we can use impacts better, I think, in what we underwrite and what we choose to finance. Finally, I'm just going to end with this. I've created a couple of trademark terms. One is semantic money, the other is storytelling money, to say when you have this granularity of the monies doing what it was supposed to do to improve people's lives, you have storytelling money. And very quickly, this is how the information and the capital would flow together to be much more credible. So with that, I'll pause.